All right, so we've talked about output questions like the John and Erica question or Artland and Rayland. Now we're going to look at something called an input question for comparative and absolute advantage. What are you looking for as a red flag or a signal that this is an input question? The answer is the unit of time is going to be what is the objective here. So take a look at this question about Brazil and Peru. This is from an AP exam. It's a multiple choice question, and you could be asked something similar in an FRQ as well. Either way, this skill is probably going to come up. So we have Brazil and Peru producing coffee and wheat using labor as the only input. The table below shows the labor hours required to produce a unit or 1 unit of coffee and a unit of wheat in each country. I have taken the data from the table and I have moved it over to a piece of paper. So if you haven't done that, I would recommend that you do that. And then the next thing is as we look at these, we think step one with comparative and absolute advantage, make one of these products on a level playing field. Now, if I look at this data, I notice that that's already done with wheat. So both of these countries take 4 hours to make 1 unit of wheat. All right. So what that means is that if Brazil focuses on the wheat, then that means they can't spend 12 hours making coffee. That's a long time to make 1 unit of coffee compared to Peru. If Peru takes 4 hours to make wheat, then they wouldn't be able to take 6 hours to make 1 unit of coffee. Now remember, when you're thinking about input, you're thinking about units of time, you're thinking about productivity. Productivity is the rate at which something is produced per hour. So Peru, in this case, has an absolute advantage in producing coffee because it takes Peru less time to make the coffee, 1 unit of coffee. It takes Brazil almost double that amount of time. So an economist would say, you're taking up too much time. That's too big of an opportunity cost. You could have made 3 units of wheat by now if you didn't make coffee, Brazil. So therefore, in this case, Peru is also going to have the comparative advantage in coffee, and therefore, in coffee, and therefore Brazil is going to have the comparative advantage in wheat, because it would take Brazil that much longer to make the coffee than Brazil. And I can make that comparison because the wheat column is all on a level playing field already, which brings me to the next point. Who has an absolute advantage in wheat? Well, no one. So if you take a look at this, both of these countries are taking 4 hours to make 1 unit of wheat. Neither nation does it more efficiently or quicker than the other. So there's no absolute advantage in wheat. And I kind of love it when this happens because it makes the answer choices that much easier to narrow down. So let's go back over to the question. And again, keep this handy. We're looking for a comparative advantage for Brazil in wheat. We're looking for it for Peru in coffee. And we're also looking for an absolute advantage for Peru in coffee and no absolute advantage in wheat. Before we look at the answer choices, can we just double check our answers with the Mr. Clifford method? So I'm going to use a different color. Remember he said cross multiply? So I'm going to go down. 6 times 4 equals 24. And 12 times 4 equals 48. Now, in an output question, we picked the bigger number, but this is about input. This is about taking less time to do something. So in this case, we're actually looking for the smaller number because it's an input question. So over here, it's 24. And that aligns with the comparative advantages that we've already determined. So again, this is why I like that method to double check, to make sure that if I did do something wrong, I could catch it before I look at the answers. So let's go back over to the question. This is the data. Here are the options. Okay, so the first thing is that there should be no absolute advantages in wheat. So right now, I can take this and I'm going to cross out B, and I'm going to cross out C because that can't be possible with the data we have. I'm looking for Brazil to have the comparative advantage in wheat. So when I look at the two questions or the options, there's only one option with Brazil, and it says that it has it in coffee. I know that's wrong. So now I'm down to Peru. Peru having a comparative advantage in wheat or a comparative advantage in coffee. Well, they can have a comparative advantage in both. So one has to be the answer, okay? So when I look at this, it aligns with coffee. That's the one that we thought of in advance. So that's the answer to this question. It's an example of an input question, and every once in a while it'll come up. Could be a multiple choice question, could be an FRQ, but this is how you would solve an input question. Hope you enjoyed it.